Greetings, this is Ty Brown, and welcome to the Pepper Dynamics Podcast, the unofficial podcast of the Pepperdine Graziadio Business School. This episode of the podcast is an initiative of the Pepperdine University chapter of Net Impact. The initiative is to help leaders broaden their thinking, build their networks, and scale their impact beyond just individual actions. Our guest today is Jay Weisbecker. Jay is 18 years in the United States Army. He was recently promoted to the rank of Major. He's a full-time MBA program here at Graziadio, concentration in leadership and managing organizational change. Of course, with Jay on, we have to express that the views and opinions expressed in this podcast are those of the individual and do not represent official policy or position of the United States government, the Department of Defense, Department of Veteran Affairs, or the U.S. Army. They are simply the views and opinions of an individual officer in the Army. Greetings, Jay. Thanks for joining us.
Absolutely. Thank you. That was a lot. I appreciate it.
It's okay. Military is something where you got to make sure you do things official, right?
Yeah. You got to get the bless off.
It's interesting. Now, Jay, 18 years in the United States Army. Congratulations on making the rank of Major. That is a major accomplishment.
Appreciate, pun intended.
Well, you were enlisted, right?
Yeah. So I started out as an E1, as low as you can be at the very bottom, in 2003. And I knew I was at the bottom because when I was at basic training, the Army gave me a check, right? And they gave me a little pay stub. And the pay stub said I owed the Army money. So I knew I was in the bad place at a bad time in my life when I realized that my first paycheck, I was in the negative.
Super interesting. But now you reached the rank of Major, which is probably the rank you're going to top out at, right?
Yeah, most likely. It would take at least 5 years to even be considered for my next promotion. So, yeah, it's probably my last.
Which is an officer, right? When people who may or may not understand military ranks to come in as enlisted and now you're an officer took a number of experiences and education to be able to get there.
Yep. So the transition requires a couple of things. You have to get a degree, right? And you have different paths you can take. One is OCS, which is Officer Cadet School. You put a packet in and they send you, to a school they just like basic training all over again. Or you can go a different route where you go through an ROTC, which is Reserve Officer Training Corps, where you're at school, and as you're doing school, you're doing additional classes. I went through a program called Green to Gold, where the Army paid me to go to college to get my degree and then go through ROTC and then come back as an officer.
They valued you enough to invest in your education to become part of the leadership within the structure of the United States Army.
That's very
I just
nice.
Interpreted what you just said.
That's a very nice way to put it. It was a very competitive package.
Uh-huh.
I think the year that I got selected, it was 150 selected out of 5,000. And since then, the program expanded and it got just as selective, but more people coming into it. So it was kind of, overall, it ended up being a huge program with very little people coming on the output. So you get 100 to 150 each year. You have 5,000 to 8,000 applications.
So it's interesting. You talk about how that, for the lack of a better word, whittled down to the few that make that transition. You think about going from enlisted and 18 years in, you're an officer, major, and you think about having a bunch of responsibilities throughout your years in the military, and there's a bunch of structure and there's a bunch of leadership. And leadership is something I want to talk to you about. But before we do, I want to talk about the many responsibilities you hold here at Pepperdine, in addition to be a full-time MBA student. And you're also part of the SEER Symposium. Now, I don't know what the SEER Symposium is, but your role as student ambassador and lead student coordinator sounds like you have a lot to do with it. I'm sure you can educate us a little bit on what the SEER Symposium is, what your role consists of, and why you are involved in it actually in general.
So to start with this SEER program, right? So socially, environmentally, and ethically responsible, right? So that's kind of part of Pepperdine's program. If you look at the broader range, you look at the parameters, it's kind of what we call CSR or ESG, which is corporate social responsibility, or socially governance and environmental responsibility. There's a lot of different acronyms that all kind of mean the same thing.
There is. We had Robert Bickel on talking about some of those things too.
Yep. So the SEER Symposium is Pepperdine's approach to it. And what they do, and this is the 9th annual one, they bring in like-minded individuals that have different fields that are impacting either the social aspect, the environmental aspect, or the ethical approach to business aspect, right? So it's ultimately you got to look at it as a way of doing business in a better way that makes a better path for our posterity. That's how I look at that. And honestly, that's why I came to Pepperdine. The SEER certificate that they provide, through the pipeline of our MBA program was why I picked Pepperdine, because I wanted a program that looked at those aspects, because I see them in my life. I've seen social issues. I've seen environmental issues. I've seen ethical challenges people have not made the right decisions on, right? And as I transition 5, 10, whenever I get out of the Army, I want to be in that space. So that's what brought me to Pepperdine. And I came here specifically for, the SEER program, right? And so the symposium is really where we take time and really try to get after it from Pepperdine, and to me, it's really why I'm here, right? So this year we really have a really great different, aspect for different people from different avenues of life. They're all impacting different types and venues of the SEER concept, right? So the first one, so he's the founder and chief executive officer of Mobility Capital Finance, and he's really looking at financial tech companies and leveraging different types of tech in the financial sphere to get over and around people's opportunity when it comes to, financing, like payday loans, stuff like that. So he's really trying to approach that where disenfranchised, lower social economic standard individuals can have the opportunity to succeed. The second person is she's the co-founder of Renewal Workshop. She's working in apparel and textile industries and trying to build a circular business model that's kind of based on reducing waste and then value-based leadership. And that aspect, which is was pretty awesome. Then the next person is part of NPR. So he's, a columnist. He's the lead NPR media correspondent. So he's spent a lot of his life, obviously, breaking stories and doing things of that nature to help the cause, right? So he's definitely what I call an ally, so to speak. And he's wrote a lot of, different columns that have gone after liberal lawsuits of a newspaper owner, people that are doing stuff that negatively impacting the space, right? So people that have done things that need to be exposed. So he's really gone after that, and to see his take on it's going to be interesting. And the last keynote speaker is, he's in the entrepreneur business executive world, right? So he's really looking at driving energy efficiencies in food packaging plants and, looking at the different aspects of refrigeration, HVACs, and lighting. And to that nature, HVACs are really a lot of the environmental aspect. So what somebody doesn't know is almost half of our electrical grid and usage goes to things that we just don't think about, and that's HVACs. So HVACs, maintaining the environment that we feel comfortable in, heat or air conditioning in large buildings and large corporations, is a lot of energy usage. And when I'm not even being facetious when I say it's like 40 or 50% of usage is just that one sphere, right? So he's looking at doing better in that space for, changing the power for retail and energy so that they're more environmentally friendly and they just use less energy impact. And there's a bunch of new technologies on that sphere when it comes to new engines and stuff like that are really cool. It's up and coming as well. So that's kind of my place and point why I'm here. I volunteered to be a student ambassador because I wanted to engage with these individuals and understand their perspective, because I really enjoy the space. And that's why I'm in Net Impact. And then talking to the lead, he was like, hey, yeah, so we could use, kind of a lead student coordinator if you don't mind. I'm like, yeah, absolutely. I'm all about the team, right? Put me in. So what that has done for me is give me the responsibility of kind of helping out these 4 individuals do they're doing videos, right? Because it's a virtual this year. So they're doing videos. And so somehow I ended up in a tech role. So IT guy, Jay. So ultimately right now, my position is more of a make things happen and fix things to make sure the actual symposium is smoother, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that does make a whole lot of sense. Clarify something for me real quick, Jay. So the symposium, are they just going to play videos from the 4 speakers, or like how is that?
Thanks, Ty, for that clarification. So it's going to be both, right? So they're going to have pre-positioned videos where they've specifically answered a video and they want you all to see something specific to their field. And then they're also going to be live at the same time. And at the end, on top of all this, there's also going to be a Q&A. So an actual interactive Q&A at the symposium. So it's not just, here's a video, watch it. Anybody can go to YouTube, right? But it's, here's a video on a specific topic. Here's the person that provided that video. Here's their, their slant, their understanding, why they did it, why they do it. And then here's an actual medium for you to engage with them on why SEER is important and how we impact.
Right. Yeah, that's interesting. It's very interesting, actually. What day is the Series Symposium?
The 24th of March.
24th. So that's coming up here actually in like a week, I guess, huh?
Yeah, we can some change. Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting. And I guess as the student ambassador and as a lead student coordinator, sometimes they say if you know how the sausage is made, you wouldn't want to eat the sausage. But for you actually being on the technical side and being involved with getting the thing set up, like, are you still excited about the event?
I am excited by the event because I've got an insight because I actually know kind of the details of the individuals, right? When I reached out to them, they reached back, and I've built that kind of relationship where like, hey, I respect these people. The way they responded to this random, guy sending them an email, right, tells me how they are as a person, and they've been very positive. Also, I can kind of cheat and watch the video ahead, so so I know what part of their conversation is going to be before it. I'm really excited for the interaction, the Q&A, and I'm just excited overall for the event in general. And that's why I've been trying to plug it as much as I can. So if you're in an MBA class with me, you're going to get hey, just so you're aware, on the 24th, there's this year's symposium. And we did a presentation yesterday in my finance class where somehow my group got picked to give the presentation on ESG. And I was like, game on.
Yeah, right, exactly. So, one of my core principles in interviewing people is always ask questions they can answer. But I have a question. I don't know if you can answer it about the Series Symposium. Is there one of the four speakers that you are more excited about than the others? Being somebody who's on the inside, I don't know if you can actually pick one, but.
They're so different fields. When I was speaking to Robert, I was like, yeah, we actually talked about each person, just kind of, he's like, hey, this is the background. So, and honestly, the guy doing it's MOCAFI. So MoCal Finance.
Yep.
I think that aspect, when it comes to the social impact of that, touches me in a place I didn't realize because I never really thought about it, right? I didn't think about the means to acquire wealth or generational wealth or being underprivileged. I grew up what I would consider underprivileged. And it was a struggle to be where I am. And that's why I appreciate people that are trying to do things for those that have to struggle. The struggle made me who I am, and I'm not going to take away from that. I would never be as resilient as I am if I didn't deal with the trauma of my life. But giving an avenue for people to have a better opportunity means a lot to me. And that's why I'm excited to understand, how finance, which is a topic that's not very near and dear to me, to be honest, how finance can really impact change in the social sphere by just giving the opportunity.
It's interesting. I think the symposium is actually going to be a pretty good event. I'm glad that you're over it because I think your leadership actually is good for the Pepperdine environment. Thinking about leadership, now 18 years in the military, the structure of the military, leadership, rank, organization, when you're out in the field, everybody needs to be on the same page or lives are at stake. Talk to us about your definition of leadership and how we can apply something like that to our experience here at Pepperdine and beyond.
So thanks for the question. So I'm going to approach this, I think, two directions. First, I'm going to talk about how we define it as a military for the Army. So the Army has something, we have regulations, stuff like that. One of them is called 6-22. And it's, it was a regulation. Now it's what we call an ADP. That doesn't matter. But really what it does is it focuses on two aspects of leadership, attributes and competencies, right? So attributes being internal, competencies, things you develop, right? So your intellect, your presence, and your character. I focus a lot on the character and the presence, the intellect. I got what I got. So the competencies is like you lead, you develop, and you achieve. And again, I really focus me personally on trying to develop people. So what does this mean for me and how does this develop me to your question in this environment? So I try to be a positive presence. I think I don't understand people's circumstances and their background, but if I add positivity and I add motivation, I can help all of us do better. Character hits hard for me because I've dealt with a lot of people that don't have the best characters. And especially growing up, I dealt with some things when it comes to character that really made me have some trauma and some issues with people, and then kind of have to redefine my character for the military. Because what I would call my azimuth, my direction, was very open parameters based on my upbringing.
In the Army, we have a value system, and we live by loyalty and duty and respect and, the selfless service and the honor, integrity, and the personal courage.
So that value-based belief system really focused my azimuth from being maybe 180 to being about 30 degrees. And from that, I've kind of tried to go down that direction. And that's why character is so important to me. If you have bad character and you don't try to change it, your foundation is going to crack eventually. Eisenhower, which is kind of my favorite general in American history, and probably my favorite president, to be honest, as well, defined character as kind of the base of being able to interact with him. If he had a thought that your character was askewed, he didn't want anything to do with you, because from that point on, he didn't trust you. If he can't value your integrity to do things, then he didn't want to have anything to do with it. So I try to think of the values that are important to the collective, and I really want to empower the collective, so to speak, and motivate them. So ultimately, because I haven't really answered your question yet, how do I define leadership that applies to the experience here at Pepperdine? Is that we need to care, we need to follow when we need to follow, and we need to take charge when we need to take charge and not be afraid of failure. Success is dependent on mistake. No one ever shows up and is batting 1,000, is perfect at their game. You fail, and then you learn, and then you succeed. I've never read a story where somebody was successful their entirety, right? I have failed 9,000 times more than I've succeeded, but those failures have taught me about myself, about how I lead, and who I am as a person, and how I can change those dynamics to the way I want them to be successful. So I see it collectively that people are afraid to speak up and are afraid to fail or to not save face in certain aspects. In a classroom environment, to me, that's my opportunity to learn. So if I fail, great, because I'm learning something. And I mean, I'm probably failing a lot right now. But overall, I think I am succeeding by learning. So I always try to put on, we have these little notes that you have to put for your rater and your senior rater or people that evaluate you, is I want to be the officer that drives failure for future success. And that's how I want to lead in any environment, especially in Pepperdine. Allow people the space to be safe to fail, to later succeed. If that makes sense.
It makes a whole lot of sense. I think in the things you said, being led by character and positivity, and also, a good leader knows when to follow, right? In our lives, we want to be able to follow, and we want to be able to lead when necessary, follow when necessary, but also understand that there's strength in failure, because you learn how to be the best you can possibly be and help those around you. Well, Jay, this has been an excellent conversation. I think some of the things you've talked about can be applied in our personal life and our professional lives. And I think Pepperdine Graziadio, I know me personally, I'm happy to have you in my cohort. I think the school is privileged to have you on campus to be a part of its MBA program. I really appreciate you joining us here on the Pepper Dynamics podcast.
So thank you, Ty. I absolutely believe it's a pleasure for me to be here, and to be part of your cohort is an honor as well. And appreciate taking the time with me.
Yes, sir. That was Major Jay Weisbecker. Jay is 18 years in the United States Army, and he is also a full-time MBA student here at Pepperdine Graziadio Business School with a concentration in leadership and managing organizational change. And of course, this is Ty Brown with the Pepper Dynamics podcast, where we are here to recruit, retain, inform, and highlight the Pepperdine Graziadio Business School community. And keep in mind, the role of a leader is to create and maintain an environment that people want to be a part of. And as always, be better tomorrow than you are today.